Today we're at Felbrigg Hall, a stunning, timeless Jacobean mansion set in the heart of Norfolk, renowned for its exquisite architecture and rich history. Built in the 17th century, it seamlessly blends Tudor and Georgian influences. Beyond its architecture, it is celebrated for its picturesque grounds with serene parklands and a walled garden bursting with seasonal flowers and produce. So let's explore further. Good morning, and you join us today in Aylsham, which is where our Airbnb is situated. It's slightly overcast today, but the sun is out and it doesn't look as if it's going to rain for the whole day, which is delightful. It makes a real change from the day that we came. So today the plan is to go to another National Trust property, which will be Felbrigg, which is about 20 minutes from where we're staying, and is an elegant country house that dates back to before the Doomsday. Apparently it was developed over many centuries by the de Felbrigg family and is a joy to behold, I should say. It's a bit different to the one that we went to yesterday in that it's not so pretentious. It's set in about 506 acres and has again another mix of parklands together with a nice house and a lot of walks that you can do. I doubt if we'll be doing the walks, and I'm pretty sure that Joanne won't do the ice house when she hears it's full of bats, but we will have a look around the gardens and we'll have a look around the house and we'll take you guys with us. Felbrigg Hall is in Felbrigg, which is up near Cromer, which is the location that we visited on the first day that we'd arrived in Norfolk. It's around 12 miles or so from our Airbnb, which will take us around 15 minutes to get there.
I'm parking in main car park only, no parking on the drive, so.
There's a reasonably long drive leading up to the Felbrigg estate, and it's really picturesque. You've got rolling parklands, some really old trees, and you've also got grazing fields where you'll find sheep. There is only one car park here, and it's the usual National Trust pay and display. It's situated midway between the walled garden and the hall itself, which is an ideal location. As the weather was fine, we decided that we would go in the walled garden first. Are you still thinking of doing a pear tree?
Yeah, we can train them on the wall and kind of like the ones we saw yesterday.
We'll go into the treasure garden, shall we? So the walled garden doesn't allow dogs in there, which if you're planning to visit is worth bearing in mind, though dogs are allowed in other parts of the estate. Now, the high walls gives it obviously its name, but it also creates a microclimate, and that keeps the garden a significant number of degrees warmer than the world around the walls. We found that when we lived in Surrey, we backed onto a hill and we always had a different climate in the back garden than we did in the front.
It's all flower in autumn.
The walled garden is segmented into different sections, and each section has a different look and feel and different planting. We actually bought this from a National Trust property and it's done extremely well at home. This part of the walled garden has gravel on the floor, which I think looks really nice as it gives it a bit more of a tropical vibe. It's also quite practical because it allows you to walk around the garden even when it's been raining.
It's a hardy one that comes every year.
The plants in this section also reinforce the tropical vibe that we talked about earlier.
It's my mate.
In this area there's some lovely sculptural benches which you can sit down and take the weight off your feet if you so wanted to. I guess the walls that surround the garden are probably 12 to 15 foot high. Whilst each of the sections is actually named, it's a little bit difficult to work out which section is which. And here we have a butterfly hibernation box, and as it says, it's also used by ladybirds and lacewing. Indeed, the gardens, particularly this one, showcase some really good examples of gardening practices that balance heritage and preserving that with sustainability, and also having a good eye to making sure that the insects and animals are adequately catered for as well. This first section has a really nice vibe. As I said, it feels tropical, but it also feels very contemporary against the backdrop of the heritage, the walls. Really nice. So furthest away from the entrance in this segment of the garden, there's a small picnic area which would be nice to sit down, relax and have a small bite to eat if you bought a packed lunch, for example. Through the archway to enter the next section of the garden. This part of the walled garden feels slightly more formal and a little bit more quintessential English. Every wall in the walled garden has something growing up it, which adds to the overall picturesque setting that you get. In some cases it will just be greenery, and in other cases they've trained things like figs to grow along the wall, which is really nice. Overall, it really adds something to the overall heritage feel. We're not gardeners, we like gardening. We enjoy the plants that we put in, and we quite often buy plants from the National Trust. But apparently in this garden, and I wouldn't know which ones they are, there's some absolute gems of plants that you won't find anywhere else. I really like to see the greenhouses here. I believe that they're original Victorian greenhouses that the National Trust has restored and then continues to maintain. If not, they're anyway very good replicas, and they feature that sort of timber and glass structure which was very typical of the Victorian times. In one of them you've got a vinery which is absolutely jam-packed, and it houses several grapevines, and that reflects the way that the Victorians would have trained and pruned plants at that time. And on the other side of the walkway, in the other greenhouse, you've got other more tropical and ornamental plants, as well as citruses and fruits. All really nice. This part of the wall garden I've seen referred to by a number of different names, both the Bacchus garden, which I suspect reflects the statue that's here, or the kitchen garden, and as you'll see there's a lot of natural products and also chickens that freely roam the garden. One of the things we absolutely love is the National Trust's focus on sustainable gardening techniques, and you see that here, particularly around the use of the chickens as a natural pest control, because it can only reduce the need for chemical pesticides, which creates a much healthier environment. The pecking motion and scratching that the chickens do at the soil actually helps to aerate the soil and improves its structure. This part of the garden more resembles a kitchen garden with its focus on vegetables and fruits. In this section of the garden we find the octagonal Dove Cot, which is actually brimming, would you believe it, doves. Historically, dove cots were used to house both doves or pigeons, and it was for purely practical purposes. It basically provided a source of meat and a ready available source of protein. Also, the eggs were considered a delicacy. However, these days there's a much more practical purpose in that pigeon droppings are rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, and that makes them an excellent fertiliser for crops. You know, back in the day they would have been a symbol of wealth, as they indicated the owner's ability to maintain a sustainable food and manage the estate. The Dove Cot at Felbrigg is thought to have been built in 1750. It has 968 holes at the back, and each hole will take up to 2 nests. So we're now in the site of the old orchard, which has seen better days. In one corner was the chicken coop, but nobody was at home. So to fix things, the trees that were dying or already dead were removed. Now, replanting them is not as easy as you and I would think. Fruit trees apparently suffer from something called replant sickness, and that's caused by the build-up of fungi around the root system, which, whilst it's beneficial to those trees that have grown up with it, the fungus will quickly overcome newly planted trees, killing them. So instead, hazel trees have been planted together with some specimen trees to provide shade. Basically, the National Trust are hoping that moving forward they get a nice bunch of hazelnuts and there aren't too many squirrels. And Joanne is holding court here.
Thank you for parting with your sandwich.
We're both thoroughly enjoyed our experience at the walled garden, but we decided we'd come and see the hall. After all, that was what we'd actually come to see. So we went back to the car park, and if you then go in a due north direction, at least I think it's north, you get to a small path that then leads down towards the hall. Felbrigg Hall was built in the 17th century, and basically it was the home for the Windham family, who were here for a number of generations. The house as it is today is very much a fusion of Jacobean architecture with some later Georgian additions. The hall was actually gifted to the National Trust by Robert Windham Keaton Cramer, the last squire, in 1969. Though he continued to live at the hall for a number of years, he was passionate about preserving both the history and the heritage, and he made the decision to leave Felbrigg Hall to the National Trust on that basis, so that it would be preserved for future generations. This is the morning room, which was the original location of the kitchen and the buttery, but it was all converted in the 19th century. The walls are adorned with the family photographs and pictures. In the 15th century, Felbrigg was owned by the Norfolk Windhams, but the line of the Windham family ended in around 1599, and it was inherited by the Somerset branch of the Windham family, who between 1621 and 1624, Sir John Windham and his son Thomas built the south front using the remains of that earlier building, and adopted the Norfolk spelling of the name Windham. However, the major changes to Felbrigg were made by the son of Thomas Windham, who was William Windham I, and basically he extended the house, building the west wing in the 1680s. It was his grandson, also known as William Windham II, who made some of the substantial and lasting features that created the Georgian interior that we see today. William Windham II had a fascination with Italy, which came from his grand tour, which took place over a 5-year period in 1738. On return from his grand tour, and heavily influenced by it, he remodelled the house, bringing in a number of ideas from his adventures. The ceiling in this room, the Great Hall, was heavily influenced by that grand tour. It's made of wood to look like plaster. William's remodel created the dining room out of what would have once been the staircase. The dining room is quite restrained and reflects more about how food would be served in the mid-19th century. At that time, it was in the ownership of the affluent Keaton family, who bought it in order to raise themselves up the social ladder, and they would have had many dinner parties here. So we continue into the drawing room, and prior to William Windham II's remodel, this would have been the great parlour, which would have been the main reception and dining area, and it would have been in use up until the late 17th century. After the remodel, this became the place to relax and feel more comfortable after a big meal. The original function of the room is still evident. If you look up at the ceiling, and the intricate plasterwork that's there depicts things like flowers and fruit, going back to its time as the great parlour. For William Windham II, this was his private space, a place only for close friends and immediate family, somewhere that he could bring and talk about his adventures on the Grand Tour, a room designed for one purpose, to hold his Grand Tour souvenirs. And these days it's probably the most complete example of a Grand Tour cabinet room in existence in England. Here he would have entertained and amused his guests with stories about the Grand Tour. He would then have shown them the artwork and other souvenirs and artefacts that he'd actually brought back. Back in the 18th century, very few people had had the opportunity to go abroad. This must have been really awe-inspiring to those that listened to his stories and saw his souvenirs. We are now in the Stair Hall. It was created as part of the 1750s remodel when the stairs were moved from what is now the dining room to this location. The skylight was added in the 1930s. What would have originally been the great chamber back in the Jacobean modelling of the house was turned into this fantastic Gothic library by William Windham II as part of the remodel in the 1750s. There are over 5,000 books here dating from 1509. One of the most notable being Dr. Samuel Johnson's famous dictionary, which he left as a dying gift to his young friend William Windham III. It is thought that William Windham III still haunts the library. Whilst William had a passion for books, it ultimately led to his demise as he attempted to rescue a friend's library from fire, sustaining injuries that ultimately proved fatal. As you came into the library, there was this little space hidden, and I did think it might be one of those monks' hiding places, but no, it's where they used to keep a chamber pot, just in case. What a nice place to sit and read a book. Not the most comfortable of spaces, but lovely views, lovely light. This room was originally William Windham II's dressing room. However, the real standout item here is the green slipper bath. What a contraption! We then entered into a row of interconnecting bedrooms. There was no corridor. One room then led into the other, which was a bit different to what we normally have these days. The first room was the yellow bedroom, and that was a principal guest bedroom. And then the next one was the rose bedroom. and then that was followed up by the red bedroom. This is the Chinese bedroom, originally known as the bow window dressing room. It's located directly above the cabinet room at the northern end of the west wing. In 1751, William Windham II added the bay window whilst preserving the original ceiling. The room takes its name from the hand-painted Chinese wallpaper supplied by the architect James Pain in 1751. This wallpaper is identical to that at Up Park in West Sussex, another project that Pain was involved in, and it was hung by the London paper hanger John Scruton in the spring of 1752. Although Windham complained about the expense of hiring a London specialist, the meticulous work requiring both skill and design sense can be seen in the way the wallpaper was condensed or stretched to fit the room. In his remodelling of Felbrigg, William Windham II demonstrated a huge respect for the building's history. This sensibility extended to the interior, where he blended fashionable Chinese wallpaper with his family's older Asian heirlooms. It's incredible to think that this house was still being lived in the late 1960s. The whole house seems to have been frozen in the mid-18th century, and that's as true of the kitchen as much as it is anywhere else. Traditional Chinese brass pots and pans hang from dressers over scrubbed worktops and flagstone floors, and two traditional kitchen tables. The only modern appliance seems to be the Aga at the far end of the room. You could just picture the cooks slaving away, preparing the meals.
Oh, I'm watching, I'm thinking you were behind.
This is apparently the servants' wing.
Ah, okay.
In Victorian times, a house like Felbrigg needed to be largely self-sufficient. Dedicated rooms were designed for the various domestic tasks, including a game larder, bakehouse, pump house, brew house, larder and scullery. These spaces are not typically open for the public. The South Corridor was originally built in the 1750s and then enclosed in 1825. It was created to address the constant threat that all country houses have: fire. At Felbrigg, a basic precaution against fire included leather and metal fire buckets. Notably, the area east of the clock tower is now single-storey due to an explosion in the 18th century at the fireworks shop located above the tenant's waiting room. In recent years, the corridor has suffered from water ingress and drainage problems caused by a failing rainwater drainage system. To protect the area from further damage, parts of the collection have been relocated, including the prominent leather and metal fire buckets, and a project is underway to identify solutions and address the various challenges in this area. To one side of Felbrigg Hall is a courtyard, and we went into the gift shop, and it stocks a wide variety of typical National Trust Memorabilia, so everything from books, cards, blankets, garden ornaments, children's books, scarves, hats and rucksacks. A small corridor to one side of the gift shop leads to another area, which I'm guessing from the way it's decked out used to be a stable. Had a few more items in there. Outside in the courtyard is a seating area and the squire's pantry, a tea room which offers a selection of hot and cold drinks, sandwiches, scones and cakes. The food on offer changes as the season changes, and you can get fresh seasonal produce from the walled garden and other local producers. And you also have the mandatory National Trust second-hand bookshop as well, though this one is not in a stable. Opposite the courtyard and accessed through a gate is a trail through the fields that leads you up to St Margaret's Church, the burial place for the Windham family. The village of Felbrigg once surrounded this church, but probably due to the plague which befell the parish in the 16th century, the village was rebuilt a considerable distance away. Robert Windham Keaton Cramer is buried here in the graveyard at St Margaret's Church, and a plaque remembers him inside. I had originally expected to find him in the crypt along with his relatives. He was an English landowner, biographer and historian, born in Devon, educated at Harrow and read English literature at Oxford. He inherited the Felbrigg estate on his father's death in 1933. He served as a Justice of the Peace, a High Sheriff of Norfolk and was a trustee of the National Portrait Gallery. He never married and bequeathed Felbrigg Hall to the National Trust. I was surprised to learn that this lovely country church is not in the care of the National Trust like the Hall, or even the church's Conservation Trust, but it's still in regular use as part of the Ranton group of parishes, all of which I understand are as open and welcoming as this one. The tag can reliably be dated to the lifetime of Simon de Felbrigg. His badge appears in the spandrels of the west door. He died in 1442, and that suggests that the tower was probably constructed during his lifetime, i.e. completed by the mid-15th century. The body of the church underwent significant restoration during the Victorian era. Alterations had already been made earlier by the family, blocking windows to create space for their monuments on the interior walls. We're now going in search of the Victory V, 2 avenues of trees planted in the shape of a V by Robert, the last squire of Felbrigg Hall. It commemorates V-Day and the death of his younger brother, Flying Officer Richard Windham Keaton Cramer, who was killed during the Battle for Crete whilst on active service in the Second World War. Whilst walking along the tree-lined avenues, we reflect on our visit to Felbrigg. It's not as pretentious as some. It's a country home which has been largely in the care of one family for generations. It portrays an intimate and homely setting and remains amazingly largely unchanged from the mid-18th century. Over the years, its caretakers have been very sympathetic to its history, the guides were engaging and very knowledgeable, the rooms and history interesting. All in all, a thoroughly great day out. This is the ice house. And these are the bats. There's a natus bat, a brown long-eared bat, a common piptroll bat, and a Dobson's hat. However, it was really dark and I didn't see a single bat. This is our last day in Norfolk. Tomorrow morning we'll be packing up and going down to Suffolk for the next part of our adventure, so please join us.